In this demonstration here from Gluware, we're going to take a look at new capability introduced with Gluware 5 related to automating Cisco Meraki. Specifically, we're going to look at some greenfield capability in automating net new network provisioning and net new device provisioning. So let's jump into the UI. So before we jump into the new functionality, I would just want to quickly highlight that a prerequisite of going into, in this case, Network RPA and automating the greenfield, I just want to showcase that Gluware is already connected to the Meraki cloud service. So you can see the cloud connection here. We're already discovering all the devices in the network. And so I'll just show you that this particular network, what's there. And then I'll navigate over into config modeling, and just to show you that the underlying config modeling policy is there too, to automate changes and automate policies on your existing orgs, networks, or devices. So with those underlying capabilities being there, and there's a longer video that demonstrates the new Gluware API modeling for Meraki, this video is going to highlight the new capability released with our maintenance release 1, expanding that functionality, adding a package of tasks in Network RPA. So let's navigate over into Network RPA and take a look. Okay, here we are in Network RPA, and we're in our workflow library. And to make this very interesting, instead of looking at a workflow that's already been built to accomplish this demonstration, we're going to build it from scratch. So let's go ahead and execute a new workflow creation. I'm going to call it Meraki Greenfield because we're going to be simulating what you would be doing to automate the new creation of new networks in a Meraki instance, as well as new devices that are being provisioned into those networks. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll make it public at the lowest access level from a workflow perspective and click Next. Okay, so here we are in our canvas, essentially the editor for Network RPA. And what you're going to notice is all the tasks on the right-hand side. And this is a drag and drop canvas. So I don't have time in this tutorial to go deeply into all of the capabilities about Network RPA. We're going to focus it around this use case, which is, again, deploying net new networks and net new devices in Meraki instances. So let me start by showing you two of the packages that are new in the maintenance release 1 that came out end of December with Gluware release 5. So let's first take a look at some workflow context. And so what I'm going to do is drag in a first task, which is set workflow context. And then the very last task of this particular workflow is going to be to remove workflow context data. So the short definition or explanation of this is that these tasks are going to help manage the data from a variable perspective. Gluware 5 introduced variable management. This particular workflow is going to be helping deal with your API connection details, your org details, your network details, and other things. And so by just being able to set the workflow context to handle it for you, that's going to kind of free you up to not have to deal with any variable configuration throughout any of the other tasks. So we'll see that. Next, let's take a look at the new package of tasks that are new related to Cisco Meraki. So I'm going to search on Meraki, and here's the package. Okay, so let's jump through the workflow and the required steps here. And so what I'm going to do to kind of just speed up the building of this is drop in all the required tasks for the use case I'm going to demonstrate. And then we're going to go through and configure or explain the tasks after that. So we have our variable management in place. So the first thing I want to do is set my Meraki information, basically the connection defaults. So I'm going to drop that in. And again, I'm going to go explain what that is, but I have to instruct this workflow what Meraki instance I'm talking about. And in the underlying Gluware instance, there's one particular connection details related to the Meraki cloud. So we'll take a look at that. Next is we're going to create and deploy Meraki network. So the create and deploy Meraki network task is around the creation of a net new network. This is an optional step, but in the use case I'm emulating here, quite a few of our customers are rolling out Meraki, pretty broadly. And when you're rolling out a new site, you generally create a new network. A network is usually synonymous with a site. And then in that network, then you assign the devices. And so we're going to show that. Next is when you create a network, it's often the case where you're going to want to assign policies to the network. So we're going to demonstrate that. Now we're going to do the step I talked to a little bit already, which is adding a Meraki device. So let's go ahead and add a Meraki device after that. And again, we're going to go through and configure each one of these. After I add a Meraki device, I want to add the Meraki device to a network. So we'll drop that in. Next, Meraki has a notion of claiming a device. You can add a device into Meraki generally, and it will sit in the inventory. But once you claim the device, then you are stating that that device is in use and you're assigning it into like an org in the network. And so we're going to execute the claim Meraki device. Okay, so that is all I need. These are the steps that I need. And in this case, showcasing workflow here that is accomplishing two things. It is building a net new network and in Meraki, and it will also add one or more devices. So let's jump through and show you now the required configuration for each one of these tasks. Okay, so first is the set workflow context. We only have to do really deal with variables once here. All I need to do is on this particular task, create a variable, and you can give it really any name, but I'm going to call it RPA context. You can leave it as string, and you can leave it as task response. You can kind of leave these as the defaults, hit save here, and you want to remember to hit save here again. That creates in the background variable management that is going to be maintained for the context of this workflow. So again, I'm not going to go in too much depth on it. There's ways to see exactly what data is being stored in there, but for now, let's just say it's handling the variable management. In this next task, we have to set the Meraki connection defaults. So this is able to read my underlying Gluware configuration. So here's my Meraki cloud service. Here's the org I have. And I don't need to specify a network because I'm going to be creating a new network. So I need to configure the task and hit save. Next, I'm going to create and deploy a Meraki network. So I'm going to say new network. You can give it any name. I'm giving it this name so that when we look in Meraki, you're going to see this stands out very easily. And this is a required component of the Meraki config is to say what product types are in that network. And I'm going to just click off for that Gluware supports here and hit save. So that new network is going to get created in the Meraki system and into the Gluware system. Now we have the opportunity to assign policies to Meraki. So we covered this in more detail in the API modeling example, but basically in my network settings, I have different policies that Gluware can manage for you in terms of from an automated standpoint. Let's just for demonstration standpoint, I could assign all of the policies, but just for demonstration, I'm going to assign my SNMP that I'm automating SNMP, and I'm going to assign it this particular setting that is available in config modeling. So this is something that's already predefined, and I'm just going to be assigning it to that new network that got created. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes, but you could automate the entire configuration of your network or whatever parameters that you want to initiate from the start. Again, once you're done configuring your task, hit save. Now we're going to add the Meraki device. I'm going to call the device I'm creating, call it new appliance. The device type is an appliance. And then you have to have a valid serial number for Meraki. You can't put in just any number. This will be validated on the Meraki side. So you have to use a valid serial number when you do this. And note that Gluware requires the underlying licenses or capacity of license in the Meraki system already. So we're just adding a new device into the system and claiming it. So that's all you need. You configure the device, And you could add additional devices. So if I was deploying a site and it had 2 routers and a switch and an appliance, I could add all of those here. But just for demonstration purposes, we're going to add one new device, but certainly you can add multiple devices all in one step here. I'm not assigning the org or the network. This is going to be, again, implied through the context. So that's what said. If nothing is specified, it will use the context. And the context is pulling from that original connection that we've already defined here. So I'm good here. I click Save. Next is Add Meraki Device to the Network. Again, I don't have to specify a network. The default behavior is to use the context and use the brand new network that has been created. Now, I could specify one of the existing networks, but that's not what I'm trying to do in this use case. And then from a claim Meraki device standpoint, these are all the devices that are in my system. I am adding a new device. So by default, I'm going to be claiming the new device that I'm adding. I don't have to do anything for that. And these other devices, I don't have to do anything for either here. I have the option to add additional devices to claim. I don't need to in this demonstration, so I'll just hit Save. And then the final element is really just cleanup, because the set workflow context will be creating a data store for the variables. At the end, we're just deleting that data store because it's ephemeral data. You don't really need it post workflow. If you didn't do this, you would have that data available to you, and you could see it, but ultimately it's not going to be used anymore. So best to have good kind of hygiene and go ahead and get rid of it. So once I'm done, as you saw, very quickly drag and drop and build my workflow here, and then step through each of the tasks and get them configured. I need to save my workflow, so it's successfully been saved, and then I need to perform a validation. Validation is just going to make sure that anything that needs to be configured or has reference variables or anything is referenceable, and it validates all that. Now I have the ability to run it right from here, or I could exit out and run it anytime or schedule it or trigger it. But because I do want to demonstrate it, oftentimes when you're building these as in the development of workflows, you're going to want to do this anyway. But we do have, again, not to get into too many of the details of Network RPA, this workflow is in a test status. Once I've validated it or tested it, I can move it to production, or I can move it to production without testing it. That's my choice. But basically, you have the notion of test and production workflows. And if you're automating devices specifically, like down to the network layer, that would be, you'd be automating test devices or production devices. So let's go ahead and run the test here and execute. Okay, so the workflow is running here at the top, and to the right hand side here I can see I navigate to my task view, and I can see the workflows iterating through the tasks. So setting the workflow context, setting the Meraki connection defaults, create and deploy the Meraki network, assign policies, add Meraki device, add Meraki to the network, claim the Meraki device, and then remove the workflow context. And it completed in 23 seconds. So looks good here. You also can click in and see the detailed log with some of the API interactions with Meraki. And so let's see what we built here. If we navigate into the Meraki instance and we take a look, refresh our all networks view. We've built a network called New Customer Network, and it does have the one device in it as well as expected. So that was built, and we automated the creation of that network and the device. If I navigate over to the devices, I can see new appliance was built. It's a Z3 model. We gave it the name New Appliance, and it is in the network New Customer Network. So we have a successful provisioning of a creation of a new network, and in this case just one device added to it, but you can certainly automate more. So with that, this concludes the demonstration of the Gluware Greenfield supported by the new set of tasks available in Network RPA. Thank you for your attention.